In the last 3 decades of Resident Evil, the franchise has wildly fluctuated in tone, quality, and direction. What started as a pioneer of survival horror gradually leaned more and more into its action influences until it all accumulated in RE6, a title that, while by no means irredeemable, served as a demonstrative perversion of everything the series originally stood for. This was all corrected in its direct follow-up, RE7, which, for all intents and purposes, brought things back on track. I bring all this up to say Resident Evil is no stranger to experimentation and tonal balancing, and because of that, it has taken on many different forms throughout its lucrative lifetime. So when Requiem was first announced and shown to the public, my main question was which side of the series it would be paying tribute to. Pure survival horror? An action hybrid fused with tense elements? Or an odd amalgamation of the two, reminiscent of past entries like Village? Well, I got my answer the moment the game went live. My friends and I pulled an all-nighter, playing through the entirety of Requiem in one sitting. And well, RE9 does not fall into any of the aforementioned categories. No, this game commits what is quite possibly the biggest sin any entertainment product is capable of. Resident Evil Requiem is nothing at all. A product of insecurity, desperation, and no shortage of conceptual laziness that wages war against nearly every aspect of itself. An experience ripe with contradictions and a blatant misunderstanding of the legacy it's attempting to honor. This has got to be one of, if not, the most disappointing sequel I've ever had the displeasure of playing, and it breaks my heart to say that. But in the interest of transparency, it's important to just be open about my feelings while hopefully doing an adequate job of expressing my misgivings of this polarizing installment in the RE universe. That said, let's begin. One clear positive that neither I nor anyone else will attempt to downplay is Requiem's gorgeous presentation. Utilizing the power of the RE engine, as well as 9th generation hardware, Capcom continues to impress with high-fidelity graphics, seamless motion capture, and atmospherically gorgeous art direction. Seriously, this game is a feast for the eyes, and a lot of the environments make full use of dynamic lighting to make for hauntingly beautiful locales. We have never been closer to perfect photorealism, and it shows. I'd be remiss to not also share my praises of the sound design, which works in tandem with what's on screen to maximize tension and create a sense of suffocating dread that persists through most of the game's runtime. Unfortunately, the soundtrack, while not bad, is one of the least memorable in the series, which is a shame considering its history of iconic music. Aside from that small hiccup, further contributing to the game's polish are the vocal performances, which this time around I was very impressed with. Angelina Santabana performs the voice and motion capture for Grace Ashcroft and delivers the most guttural and grounded performance in any RE title up to this point. She pours her heart and soul into this character. If Angelina isn't so much as nominated for Best Actor at this year's Game Awards, there may as well be no point in the category even existing. Nicholas Apostolides reprises his role as Leon S. Kennedy, and he does an alright job. To clarify, I've never been the biggest fan of Nicholas's take on Leon. His natural candidness and casual voice fit the RE2 make version of the character like a glove, since it encapsulated his optimism and naivety, but when it comes to modern Leon, who's significantly older and more grizzled, Nicholas isn't the greatest fit, and I feel he tries to overcompensate by trying way too hard to sound badass, but instead comes off as an emo teenager. He just doesn't radiate the same professional, cool energy that Paul Mercier and Matthew Mercer were able to. But of course, I have nothing against the actor himself, he seems like a really cool guy. Tony Brine as Victor Gideon, Eden Riegel as Sherry Birkin, and Craig Bernatowski as Zeno are all worthy highlights and make for a tight cast. Lastly, I want to dedicate a portion of this video to gushing over the zombies. Yep, for the first time in an original mainline RE game since RE6, zombies are the primary threat and they look stunning, with incredibly realistic animations. What makes these zombies especially creepy is that they all still retain memories from their past lives, often yelling in bouts of confusion that represent all that's left of their fading awareness. It capitalizes on what makes zombies so terrifying in the first place. their vague semblance of humanity used as an unintentional mask for the hollow monsters now inhabiting their victim's skin. This is some excellent body horror which is befitting for a Resident Evil game, and a lot of the enemy types introduced are obscenely well designed. That about does it for RE9's presentation. I doubt a single soul was honestly expecting anything short of impressive in that department, but it's worth praising nonetheless. Leading up to Requiem's release, I remember reading an article where game director Koshi Nakanishi was interviewed about the altering gameplay styles RE9 would be comprised of. Quote, "Imagine there's no such thing as sushi. If sushi hadn't been invented yet, a fish lover would just want to eat sashimi, raw fish. A rice lover would just want rice. Then some guy goes, I've made this thing, it's called sushi, it's raw fish on rice. Imagine how you'd feel if you were someone who loved eating rice, like, what are you putting raw fish on my rice for? Or if you're a sashimi person, you're just like, give me sashimi, why are you ruining my fish with rice? We're the inventors of sushi here. Even if you think you want one style, the flavor of this game comes from the combination of the two styles. The idea is that by combining them together, they are more than the sum of their parts." End quote. Requiem is basically two eras of RE fused into one package, at least in theory. Grace's gameplay is meant to be pure survival horror, harkening back to a style of play similar to the classics and particularly RE2 Remake, which was a modern reinvention. Leon's gameplay is meant to scratch an action itch and is built on the foundation of RE4 Make, while occasionally engaging in over-the-top set pieces seen in games like RE6. This should be the best of both worlds. I mean, after all, there's something here for everyone, right? Well, that's the first major issue. This game is built on a lie. There is no survival horror to be found anywhere in this title. But what about Grace, you may ask? Well, here's the thing. Grace's gameplay isn't survival horror, it's just horror. Let me explain. What made the original game so engaging was their emphasis on strategy and resource conservation. You, as the player, were given access to a reliable but finite string of resources, which yes, did de-incentivize combat, but didn't outright negate it as an option. It wasn't about whether you should kill enemies, it was about which enemies should you kill, which areas were worth clearing out, and which weapons would be best suited to each respective task. The key was to optimize your chances of survival, and the most important ingredient to the idea of optimization is freedom of choice, options. This system was incredibly stressful but never failed to reward smart thinking. Every death, while punishing, served as a lesson on how better to approach any number of confrontations. While the classic games progress in a linear fashion, they hide that linearity behind a thin veil of player expression. And unfortunately, that is not the case of Requiem. Combat isn't just de-incentivized as Grace, it's downright impossible in most scenarios. Grace is given a next to non-existent arsenal and rarely any ammunition, in a facility filled to the brim of zombies. Fighting is only ever useful if the goal is to stun for a brief window of escape or enforce scripted events. So if optimizing resources isn't the gameplay element being prioritized here, what is? Stealth. So much fucking stealth. Basically, imagine the scripted, boring Sherry sequence in RE2 Make, but made into a full game. So much as your time as Grace is just sitting crouched in a corner or under a table, waiting for an enemy to do its usual rounds and proceeding ahead. What starts out as an exciting novelty turns into one of the most conventional, streamlined, by-the-numbers, boring as shit gameplay I've ever seen from an RE title. There's no strategy, no player expression, just generic enemy pathing and only one right method of confrontation. There's nothing hiding linearity. Whereas a death in the classic games was a chance to better improve your run and make adjustments to your planning, a death as Grace is just another 10 or 20 minutes of doing the exact same shit that led to it. I have not the slightest idea why Capcom seems dead set on killing what set this franchise apart from the competition, and why so many people are praising this game for conforming to mediocrity. This isn't Resident Evil. It has much more in common with something like Outlast or PT, which ironically enough was what people were scared RE7 was going to be when that was first announced. But whereas that game wears the series' heart on its sleeve, this one doesn't. It's just so generic. The idea that this is supposed to be emulating the gameplay of RE2 Make is an insult to that game's design. While the care center is an interesting enough location, maneuvering around it is a chore because of the monotonous stealth, and a lot of the puzzles here are outright pathetic. Even though the building blocks of survival horror are present in Grace's gameplay, they just don't come together. But why would Grace be this watered down? Well, enter Leon Kennedy. As mentioned before, Leon's gameplay is meant to serve as a stark contrast to Grace's, allowing the player to indulge in a blind power fantasy, living life as an action hero. To the game's credit, it is effective. A game to play as Leon and slaughter all the enemies who previously gave you trouble was a form of ecstasy and satisfaction that nearly felt unreal. But, just like everything else in this game, the novelty gets old really fast. Leon's segments are dreadfully dull and painfully repetitive. What made the action gameplay work in previous games was a mix of strategic positioning and excess of enemy types that shook up variety, and in RE6's case, a ridiculously over-the-top and fun melee system. In Requiem, you're constantly fighting the same zombies with rarely any meaningful mix-ups. There's just so little variety, it's so boring. And this brings me back to Koshi Nakanishi's sushi analogy from earlier. I find his comments unifying both styles of RE downright absurd, since this game goes out of its way to do the opposite. What they've done is take survival horror and fragment it into two radical extremities. Grace is horror with no survival, and Leon is survival with no horror. These two styles are exaggerated to the point of being parodies of their own genres. Wanna know what makes this all the more bizarre? Requiem's predecessor, Village, did this with far more success. Both the opening and Castle Dimitrescu sections played like classic survival horror, albeit with action undertones inherent to Village's base mechanics. The point is, the pacing, atmosphere, exploration, and puzzle solving were clearly harkening back to the series' roots. But by the time you reach Heisenberg's factory with a wider selection of upgraded weaponry, the game turns into an unashamed action thriller, emblematic of the madness present in RE4-6, which all leads to a batshit insane boss fight against a Metalmancer. This is followed up by Chris's segment, which unlike Leon, is a power fantasy that doesn't overstay its welcome. Village is what sushi looks like, a game that encapsulates all eras of Resident Evil, but does so in a way that doesn't jeopardize its cohesiveness as an experience. The transition to action works because of gradual power scaling and the escalation of narrative stakes. RE9 is not sushi. Grace is sashimi, Leon is rice, each devoid of any actual flavor. But if you thought the gameplay was a mess, it has nothing on the story. What the fuck even was this? Just a heads up, I will not be holding back on spoilers, so if you want to experience the story for yourself, now would be a good time to click off. I appreciate you watching up to this point. To everyone else sticking around, let's begin. The story of Requiem follows Grace Ashcroft, daughter of the late Alicia Ashcroft, who was a survivor of Resident Evil Outbreak. She's now an FBI agent, traumatized by Survivor's Guilt after witnessing her mother's brutal death at the hands of an unknown entity. Grace is called to investigate a death at the Wynwood Hotel, the place where it all started, where she's abducted by a strange, disfigured man, a former Umbrella researcher named Victor Gideon, who's on Leon Kennedy's radar. Leon arrives at the facility, and shortly after, an outbreak is unleashed, and both survivors have to find their way out. As mentioned earlier, I love Angelina's performance, but as far as writing is concerned, I think Grace is just serviceable. Not a bad character by any means, and I really like how her guilt is meant to parallel Leon's guilt over not being able to save anyone in Raccoon City, but not enough is done of that parallel to make it of much narrative significance. It's a cool idea, but the theme of guilt and redemption are sorely underbaked. Grace meets a little girl by the name of Emily, and they befriend each other, with the former becoming somewhat of a maternal figure. This represents a second chance for Grace, a way of giving this little girl a connection that she lost only years prior. Again, I admire the concept, but like everything else in the story, Grace and Emily's relationship never has much time to organically develop, and her fake-out death later on has no real impact. Also, I am incredibly confused on what they were attempting to do with Leon here. He has survivor's guilt after surviving Raccoon City, and he's working to redeem himself and make a difference this time. Sound familiar? This is, beat for beat, Leon's arc in RE4 make. Traumatized and racked with guilt while infected with a virus that would kill both him and an innocent ally. At the end of that game, Leon finds the redemption he's looking for by saving Ashley and completing his mission. That was the end of that arc, and yeah, while it was shittily executed and built off the lackluster foundation laid by RE2 Make's story, at least it wasn't repetitive. Here though, the character isn't taken in any new directions, it's just reaffirming existing traits and passing them off as bold new swings. It'd be one thing if the remakes weren't canon, but no, this game goes out of its way to prioritize the canonicity of RE2 make over the 1998 original, which might I add, completely fucks the continuity. As some of you know, the Resident Evil remakes make multiple retcons within the lore, so they physically can't be taking place in the same timeline as the originals. For example, Operation Javier from Darkside Chronicles was a top secret mission where Leon Kennedy and Jack Krauser ventured into South America to apprehend a man named Javier, a crime boss who, out of desperation to save his terminally ill daughter, injected her with the T. Alexia virus via Wesker's organization, and in order to stall for time while Manuela's body adjusted to its power, he resorted to kidnapping young women in the surrounding area and infusing their organs into hers. After Manuela is rescued, they work together to defeat a mutated Javier, and as the trio ride into the sunset, Krauser's obsession of viral power begins, kickstarting his descent into darkness. Carla, one of the two main antagonists of RE6, were going to use Simmons' family connections to acquire a sample of T. Alexia through Manuela's blood, which was used alongside the G virus to create the C virus. Operation Javier is an integral part of the overarching story. It serves as narrative payoff to Wesker's victory in Code Veronica, recontextualizes Krauser as a character, and sets up RE6's main events. However, in the remake timeline, Operation Javier as we know it never happened, and it instead was an attack against a drug cartel gone awry. This retcon not only makes Krauser far less interesting as a character, but makes it to where Resident Evil 6 physically can't happen in this timeline, since in order for Carla to make the C virus, Manuela has to exist as a character. There are also other instances of this, like RE3 remake definitively killing Nikolai despite his escape from Raccoon City being confirmed a survivor, Wesker already concocting plans for Ouroboros and RE4 make, even though his infatuation of godhood doesn't start until Lost in Nightmares, Sherry only meeting Leon in the cable car in RE2 make, which goes against her personal account of the story she tells Jake, confirming Claire A, Leon B, etc, etc. The Resident Evil remakes cannot be canon, but because Capcom was to desperately erase the originals in both public consciousness and canonicity, the Resident Evil lore is now an unsalvageable mess. And Requiem makes some major retcons on its own, with one of the biggest being Raccoon City's return. After the bombing at the end of RE3, there was absolutely nothing left of it, as shown in Outbreak. You know, the game this one is bringing back to narrative relevancy. But in RE9, the city is still very much intact but full of BOWs and ruined infrastructure. This is mind-numbing, but what happens halfway through the story made me want to quit the game. Yep. Let's talk about the return of Albert Wesker. Oops, my bad. Xeno Wesker. At the game's halfway point, a new antagonist emerges, bearing the same face, voice, mannerisms, and personality of Albert Wesker, Resident Evil's most iconic villain. But it's later revealed towards the end that this Wesker was a clone with presumably his own memories and agency, before he's pathetically killed off. None of this makes a lick of goddamn sense. Let's rewind for a bit. Albert Wesker is one of several children who are part of the Wesker program, an experiment ran by Spencer where he took several children, groomed them to be loyal assets, and at the right age injected them with the progenitor virus, a virus that had an incredibly high mortality rate. Survivability was unlikely, with most in the program dying, but Albert uses connections with Birkin to receive a modified progenitor variant which kept him alive, and upon his death at the hands of the Tyrant in RE1, it mutated at an unprecedented level, essentially making Albert a superhuman. His powers emerged from a string of unlikely circumstances. I've seen some fans try to pass Xeno off as another child in the Wesker program, but this makes no sense because 1. The Wesker program had nothing to do with cloning, all of the children were unrelated, and 2. The only reason Albert survived is because his progenitor strain was modified. A clone adopting all of Wesker's superhuman abilities makes no sense, and it's just another example of obnoxious fan service over any actual narrative cohesion.
Like, I'm sorry.
I think I got to the gunsmith.
When did fucking Wattpad writers, become the Capcom writing team? Like, this is just... I feel like I'm,
I think they only looked at Twitter when trying to figure out the fan base for these games. Because that's...
This game
that's the only thing I can think of.
This game is just so desperate. It's just so desperate and devoid of any dignity or integrity. Or creativity, dude. Every single, like I'm like losing my mind. It's like every single creative decision they have made in this game so far has been one made out of sheer desperation. Like piggybacking off of like other popular like horror titles with like the whole like sneaking around, like basically just making it like a stealth horror game, so like a bunch of YouTubers can like stream it and like record it and go like all the jump scares, and, and but like still like making like RE4, like they literally said they based the combat system off RE4, like the whole second half of the game just turns into RE4. Not only RE4 though, RE4 is set in Raccoon City, where now they have to stop Albert Wesker. Like, this is just fucking, like, this is just.
No, I mean it's not Albert Wesker. It's
That shit ain't Albert Wesker. That
Zeno.
fucking.
It's Zeno.
Zeno is a shallow imitation of his Albert counterpart, and he displays a shocking amount of stupidity in the final act. It turns out that Elpis, Spencer's top secret project, wasn't a bioweapon, but instead an antiviral capable of curing just about any infection. His way of making amends and atoning for a bad life. What? Oswald E. Spencer, the man who spent his final days rotting away, lamenting about his right to be a god having been stolen, the man responsible for countless deaths and grotesque experimentations, made an antiviral to atone. This makes no sense. 1. This is completely out of character for a man as horrible and narcissistic as Spencer was. 2. Gideon tries to frame this as a plan for anarchy, but I don't see how the neutralization of viral threats makes the world more chaotic. And 3. Whatever happened to Jake Mueller? Jake Mueller's antibodies was enough to counter any infection, and is responsible for preventing the C-virus outbreak from ending the world. Why didn't Leon, or especially Sherry for direct ties to him, reach out for a cure to Raccoon City Syndrome? Furthermore, after all the testing and evaluations Leon and Sherry went through, especially the latter, I find the notion that the dormant T-virus in their bodies remained undetected to be laughable. So much of this story makes no fucking sense. This feels like something I'd find on AO3, except even AO3 fics do a better job at adhering to established canon. This is laughably bad.
But I don't have time to spare.
Okay, dude, this is what the fuck is this? This game is so fucking. What the fuck? This is literally written by Wattpad. This is actually written by Wattpad. This is literally Wattpad. Oh my god. I thought they were gonna do it. Like, I was like, will they do it? But I'm like, no, because that would be so shameless. And it'd be like the most obvious nostalgia bait shit to do, and they fucking did it.
Zeno injects Elpis into himself, expecting it to be a weapon, but it cures him of his power, which allows Gideon to betray and kill him. What was the point of bringing back our most beloved villain only for him to do nothing but aura farm? Well, our new villain fucking sucks, so we need to bank on the likeness of a far more interesting character to keep player intrigue. Gideon transforms into some sort of Nemesis variant, which is more meaningless fan service. Leon kills him, and we get the most generic happy ending possible, and the most generic stinger possible. Roll credits.
This, like, that, I'm not even mad at this game anymore, because, like, seeing them bring back Wesker just confirmed, well, like, I kind of subconsciously already knew, this is just fan service the video game. Like, this is the Rise of Skywalker.
100%.
Dude, they're both the Knight's main entry. This is, like, the Rise of Skywalker for Resident Evil. Don't think about it. Oh my god, it's literally just the Rise of Skywalker, because, dude, it has an identity crisis. It's trying to please everyone. It brings back all the fan favorites, and, like, nothing about the story makes any sense. It's the fucking Rise of Skywalker of Resident Evil.
What I find so offensive about Requiem is its complacent attitude. Every main numbered installment up to this point has been focused on evolving the series in some way, both in gameplay and narrative. But RE9 does neither. Both gameplay styles offer nothing that could be qualified as engaging, let alone unique. The story is a mess of silly retcons, and the whole thing reeks of blind nostalgia pandering. Golden Boy Leon? Check. Sherry Birkin? Check. Something resembling RE2 and RE4 gameplay? Check. Raccoon City? Check. The RPD? Check. Albert Wesker? Check. Mr. X throwback? Check. Nemesis throwback? Check. I just hate how self-referential and generic this series has become. Instead of pushing boundaries, it's begun to dramatically regress. Resident Evil Requiem doesn't commit to a single vision. It's an unfocused mosh pit of broken concepts and ideas stolen from far better games. The most idealistic outlook is that RE9, by design, is an anniversary game, a celebration of all that's come before it. But a celebration doesn't have to equate to stagnation. The only thing terrifying about Requiem is its crippling inability to commit to a solid direction. At least other black sheeps in the franchise like RE0, RE6, hell, even Survivor, are all unapologetic in their approach and try to do something different. Those games aren't perfect, but I still respect them as valid entries in the RE franchise. The same cannot be said about Requiem, and I hate that. I hate that this review is so negative. I hate the path the series is headed. I wish I had something more positive to say in this video, but what is there left to say? This game is a serious contender for the worst Resident Evil I've ever played. If anything, at least the games that preceded it aren't going anywhere. If I'm ever itching to receive some good old Raccoon City hospitality, the PlayStation originals are right there on my console. Requiem, on the other hand, will forever be doomed to linger in the shadows of its predecessors. Anyways, how was your time with Resident Evil Requiem? I hope it was a lot better than mine. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments. This video is just to get my first impressions out. I may revisit RE9 down the road after more playthroughs and do a bigger deep dive. Thanks for watching and have an excellent rest of your day. Peace out.